Welcome to our channel of terror and dread, where spine-chilling tales come to life. Brace yourselves, viewers, for you are about to embark on a journey of fear and suspense. We advise against watching alone, lest you risk the haunting shadows that may linger long after the screen fades to black. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Our stories, though true, have been cloaked in anonymity to protect the innocent. Get ready to uncover the mysteries that lurk beneath the surface of ordinary lives. Welcome to a realm where every breath could be your last. Heart-eating demon horrors. Nestled in the small town of Willow Creek, where everyone knew each other by name, a sinister darkness was about to descend. Jack Thompson, a local carpenter, was known for his kindness. He often helped his neighbors with repairs and refused payment, believing good deeds were their own reward. But Jack was about to discover the true cost of his benevolence. It started with a cold wind that blew in one late October evening. Jack had just finished repairing Mrs. Parker's fence and was heading home when he felt a shiver run down his spine. He glanced over his shoulder, but the street was empty. Willow Creek was eerily silent, the only sound the rustle of fallen leaves. He pulled his jacket tighter around himself and quickened his pace, eager to get home. As Jack neared his home, he noticed a dark figure standing under the street lamp in front of his house. The figure was cloaked in shadows, its face obscured by a hood. Jack's first instinct was to offer assistance. Perhaps this person was lost or in need. But as he approached, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a chilling sense of foreboding. He stood there for a moment, heart pounding, trying to rationalize what he had just seen. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, he thought. Shaking off the uneasy feeling, he entered his house, locking the door behind him. The warmth of his home was a stark contrast to the cold dread outside, but it did little to ease his nerves. That night, Jack dreamed of blood and darkness. He saw faces twisted in agony, heard screams that pierced his soul. When he woke, drenched in sweat, the dream felt too real, like a premonition. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just a nightmare. But the sense of dread lingered, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. The following day, Jack went about his usual routine, trying to push the unsettling encounter from his mind. He spent the morning working in his workshop, crafting a new set of chairs for the local diner. As he worked, he found solace in the familiar rhythm of his tools, the scent of wood shavings calming his nerves. By midday, he had almost convinced himself that the previous night's events were nothing more than a figment of his imagination. After lunch, Jack decided to visit Emily Walker, a schoolteacher known for her nurturing spirit. Emily was a close friend, and he hoped her cheerful demeanor would help dispel his lingering unease. He found her in her classroom, grading papers. "Hey, Jack," Emily greeted him with a warm smile. "What brings you here?" Jack hesitated for a moment, then decided to share his experience. "I had a strange encounter last night," he said, recounting the events in detail. Emily listened intently, her brow furrowing with concern. "That sounds terrifying. Are you sure it wasn't just a trick of the light?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, "but it felt real. And then I had this horrible nightmare." Emily reached out and placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Maybe it's just stress. You've been working hard lately. Why don't you take a break, relax a little?" Jack nodded, appreciating her concern. "You're probably right. Thanks, Emily." As he left the school, Jack felt a bit lighter. Talking to Emily had helped, but the unease still lingered, like a shadow he couldn't shake. That evening, as he prepared dinner, Jack heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find Father Michael Harris, the town's beloved priest, standing on his porch. "Good evening, Jack," Father Michael said, his voice calm and soothing. "May I come in?" "Of course, Father," Jack replied, stepping aside to let him in. Father Michael took a seat at the kitchen table, his expression serious. "I heard about your encounter last night," he began. "Mrs. Parker mentioned it to me this morning. I thought it might be wise to check in on you." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to make of it, Father. It felt so real, but maybe I'm just imagining things." Father Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes our minds play tricks on us, especially when we're under stress. But if there's something more to it, we must be vigilant. Evil can manifest in many forms." Jack shivered at the priest's words, the memory of his nightmare flashing through his mind. "What do you mean?" "There are forces in this world that feed on fear and suffering," Father Michael explained. "It's important to stay strong and not give in to despair. If you ever feel overwhelmed, come to the church. We can pray together and seek guidance." Jack nodded, feeling a small measure of comfort in the priest's words. "Thank you, Father. I'll keep that in mind." As Father Michael left, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was lurking just beyond the edges of his awareness. He locked all the doors and windows that night, determined to keep the darkness at bay. Emily Walker sat at her desk, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating her work. She was grading papers late into the evening, the quiet of the schoolhouse a comforting backdrop to her thoughts. She loved her job, loved nurturing the young minds of Willow Creek. But tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She looked up from her desk to see her reflection in the window. But there was something wrong. The reflection smiled back at her, even though her own lips hadn't moved. Emily blinked, and the sinister smile vanished, replaced by her own wide-eyed stare. Shaking her head, she returned to her work, but the feeling of being watched lingered. She told herself it was just her imagination, the result of too many horror stories told by her students in the lead-up to Halloween. But the unease gnawed at her, making it hard to concentrate. Deciding she needed a break, Emily stood and stretched, then walked to the window. The night was dark, the schoolyard empty. She tried to see if anyone was lurking in the shadows, but the darkness was impenetrable. With a sigh, she turned away, telling herself she was being paranoid. As she headed to the staff room to make a cup of tea, the lights flickered. Emily froze, her heart pounding. The flickering stopped, and the lights stayed on. She laughed nervously at herself. "Get a grip, Emily," she muttered. "It's just the old wiring acting up." She made her tea and returned to her desk, trying to shake off the sense of dread. As she sipped her tea, she noticed something odd about the papers she was grading. The handwriting on one of the assignments seemed to shift and twist, the letters forming words that sent chills down her spine. "They come for the kind-hearted." Emily dropped the paper, her hands trembling. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "It's just a prank," she whispered. "One of the kids trying to scare me." But deep down, she knew something was terribly wrong. As she gathered her things to leave, she heard a soft whispering coming from the hallway. She strained to listen, but the words were indistinct, like a chorus of voices just beyond the edge of hearing. Clutching her bag, she walked towards the sound, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. The whispering grew louder as she approached the main entrance. Emily's heart raced, fear clawing at her mind. She reached the door and flung it open, expecting to find someone there, but the hall was empty. The whispering ceased. She stood there, panting, trying to make sense of what was happening. Deciding she had had enough for one night, Emily locked up the school and hurried home, her eyes darting nervously at every shadow. When she finally reached her house, she locked the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to catch her breath. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily's dreams turned dark. She was running through a dense forest, her heart pounding in her chest. Behind her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of something inhuman. Emily's breath came in ragged gasps as she tried to outrun the unseen predator. Just as she felt its hot breath on her neck, she woke up with a start, her heart racing. Father Michael Harris was the town's beloved priest, known for his compassion and wisdom. He spent his days tending to the needs of his parishioners, offering solace and guidance. One evening, as he was locking up the church, he noticed a woman standing in the shadows near the altar. She was weeping softly. Father Michael approached her gently. "My child, what troubles you?" The woman lifted her head, revealing eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. Her voice was a whisper, yet it echoed through the empty church. "They come for the kind-hearted. They feed on your goodness." Before Father Michael could react, the woman dissolved into a swirling mist that seeped into the cracks of the stone floor. He staggered back, clutching his rosary, his mind reeling. He had heard of demons and dark forces, but always as distant threats. Now they were here, in Willow Creek. Shaken, Father Michael hurried to his study, where he kept a collection of ancient texts and religious artifacts. He needed to find out what he was dealing with. As he pored over the dusty tomes, a sense of urgency gripped him. The town was in danger, and he had to find a way to protect it. Hours passed as he searched through the books, looking for any mention of creatures that fed on kindness. Finally, he found a passage in an old manuscript that sent chills down his spine. It spoke of demons that rejuvenate by consuming the hearts of the kind-hearted. These creatures were drawn to places where goodness thrived, their hunger insatiable. Father Michael knew he had to warn the townspeople, but how could he explain something so unbelievable? He decided to start by confiding in Jack and Emily, hoping they would help him find a solution. The next day, Father Michael visited Jack's workshop. He found Jack working on a new set of chairs, the scent of freshly cut wood filling the air. "Jack, we need to talk," Father Michael said, his voice grave. Jack looked up, concern etched on his face. "What is it, Father?" "It's about the strange events you've experienced," Father Michael began. "I believe there's something sinister at work in Willow Creek." Jack listened as the priest explained his encounter with the mysterious woman and what he had discovered in his books. By the time Father Michael finished, Jack's face was pale. "You think demons are attacking our town?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Father Michael nodded. "Yes, and they seem to be targeting the kind-hearted. We must find a way to protect ourselves in the town." Together they went to see Emily, who had also been haunted by strange occurrences. She listened in horror as they shared what they had learned. "We need to find a way to stop these demons," Emily said, determination in her eyes. "But how?" Father Michael took a deep breath. "There may be a ritual that can protect us, but it requires the blood of the kind-hearted." Jack and Emily exchanged worried glances. "What do you mean?" Jack asked. "The ritual uses the purity of our hearts to create a protective barrier," Father Michael explained. "It's a paradox, using our own virtue to keep the demons at bay." Reluctantly, Jack, Emily, and Father Michael agreed to perform the ritual. They pricked their fingers, allowing drops of blood to fall onto a parchment inscribed with ancient symbols. As they chanted the incantation, a blinding light filled the room, and for a moment it felt as if the darkness had been pushed back. For a few weeks, the town experienced a semblance of peace. No more kind-hearted people went missing, and the community began to heal. But the reprieve was short-lived. The demons, angered by the ritual, grew more aggressive. One night, Emily was walking home from the school when she felt a presence behind her. She quickened her pace, but the footsteps grew louder. She turned a corner, only to come face to face with the demon, its eyes glowing with hunger. She screamed, but the town was eerily silent. Jack and Father Michael found her the next morning, her body lifeless, her heart removed. The ritual had not been enough. The demons were too powerful, too driven by their insatiable hunger. Desperation set in as the town mourned Emily's loss. Jack and Father Michael knew they had to find another way to stop the demons. They sought out an old legend of a hidden relic, said to have the power to banish darkness. Their search led them deep into the forest surrounding Willow Creek, to a cave hidden beneath the roots of an ancient oak tree. Inside they found the relic, a small, intricately carved stone that pulsed with a faint light. As they held the relic, a voice echoed in their minds. Only the purest of heart can wield this power. Sacrifice must be made. Father Michael understood immediately. Jack, it means one of us must give our life to activate the relic. Jack shook his head. No, we've lost too much already. There has to be another way. But the relic's demand was clear. With a heavy heart, Father Michael took the stone and placed it over his own heart. I will do this. For the town. For Emily. The ritual was simple but harrowing. Father Michael chanted the ancient words, and the stone began to glow brighter. Jack watched in anguish as his friend's life force drained away, absorbed by the relic. With a final burst of light, Father Michael collapsed, and the stone transformed into a blinding beacon that shot into the sky. For a moment, it seemed as if the darkness had been vanquished, but the relief was fleeting. The demons, sensing the loss of another pure heart, grew even more frenzied. They attacked the town with renewed ferocity, their hunger insatiable. Jack, now alone and filled with despair, realized the terrible truth. There was no stopping the demons. Their hunger was eternal, their power too great. Willow Creek was doomed. As he wandered the empty streets, he saw the faces of those who had been lost. Emily, Father Michael, Mrs. Parker, Tommy Evans, all gone. The weight of their sacrifice crushed him. In his darkest moment, Jack was confronted by the leader of the demons, a towering figure cloaked in shadow. Its eyes burned with malevolent glee. Your kindness was your undoing, it hissed. Now give me your heart, and your suffering will end. Jack, broken and defeated, offered no resistance. The demon reached into his chest, and with a final agonizing rip, his heart was torn from his body. Willow Creek fell into darkness. The town's once vibrant spirit was extinguished, its kind-hearted souls devoured by the insatiable demons. The remaining residents, now filled with fear and distrust, turned against each other, their community shattered. The demons, rejuvenated and empowered, moved on to the next town, their hunger leading them to new victims. The cycle continued, an endless feast on the hearts of the kind-hearted. In the end, there was no salvation, no victor. The demons' hunger was eternal, their power growing with each new heart they consumed. The once peaceful town of Willow Creek was left in ruins, a grim reminder of the darkness that lurked in the world. And as the demons moved on, their eyes gleaming with hunger, they left behind only death and despair, a stark warning to any who dared to show kindness in a world ruled by darkness. The town of Greendale lay nestled in a valley, surrounded by lush forests and rolling hills. It was a peaceful place where neighbors looked out for one another and children played freely in the streets. Unbeknownst to its residents, the same darkness that had consumed Willow Creek was making its way to their doorstep. Clara Mitchell, a nurse at the local clinic, was known for her compassion and dedication. She spent her days caring for the sick and elderly, always with a smile on her face. Clara had moved to Greendale a few years ago, seeking a fresh start after a difficult divorce. The town had welcomed her with open arms, and she quickly became an integral part of the community. One evening, as Clara was finishing her shift, she noticed an elderly man sitting in the waiting area. His clothes were tattered, and his eyes held a haunted look. She approached him gently. "Sir, do you need help?" The man looked up, his eyes reflecting a deep sadness. "They are coming," he whispered. "They will take your heart." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "Who is coming?" But the man only repeated his warning before collapsing into a fit of coughing. Clara rushed to help him, but as she touched his shoulder, he vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread. Shaken, Clara tried to make sense of what had happened. She decided to speak to Father Samuel, the town's priest, hoping he might have some insight. Father Samuel was a wise and gentle man, known for his deep faith and understanding of the supernatural. When Clara recounted her experience, Father Samuel listened intently, his expression growing more serious by the moment. "I've heard of such things before," he said. "There are dark forces that prey on the kind-hearted. We must be vigilant." Together they devised a plan to protect the town. Father Samuel would hold special prayer services, asking for divine protection. Clara, meanwhile, would gather a group of trusted friends to form a watch, keeping an eye out for any signs of trouble. That night, as the town slept, Clara patrolled the streets with her friend Sarah Jenkins, a local teacher. They walked in silence, their senses on high alert. The air was thick with tension, and every rustle of leaves made them jump. Around midnight, they heard a soft, eerie whispering coming from the direction of the town square. Clara and Sarah exchanged worried glances and hurried towards the sound. As they approached, they saw a figure standing in the center of the square, shrouded in darkness. "Who are you?" Clara called out, her voice trembling. The figure turned, revealing a face twisted in a malevolent grin. "We come for the kind-hearted," it hissed. "We feast on your goodness." Sarah screamed and grabbed Clara's arm. "We need to get out of here." But the figure moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. Clara felt a cold hand wrap around her wrist, its grip like iron. She struggled to break free, but the figure's strength was overwhelming. Just as all hope seemed lost, Father Samuel appeared, holding a crucifix high. "In the name of God, I command you to leave this place." The figure recoiled, hissing in anger. It released Clara and retreated into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Clara and Sarah collapsed to the ground, their hearts pounding with fear. "Thank you, Father," Clara gasped. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Father Samuel helped them to their feet. "We must remain strong," he said. "These creatures feed on fear and despair. We cannot let them win." The next few days were a blur of activity, as Clara, Father Samuel, and their friends prepared to defend Greendale. They fortified the church, setting up makeshift barricades and gathering supplies. The townspeople were on edge, but their resolve was strong. They would not fall victim to the same fate as Willow Creek. One evening, Clara was tending to a patient at the clinic when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find a young woman standing there, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. "Please, you have to help me," the woman pleaded. "They're after me." Clara ushered her inside and closed the door. "What's your name?" "Grace," the woman replied, her voice trembling. "I escaped from Willow Creek. The demons, they killed everyone." Clara's heart sank. "You're safe here," she said, though she knew it was a fragile promise. "We'll protect you." As she spoke, the lights in the clinic flickered and went out. The room was plunged into darkness, and Clara felt a cold dread settle over her. She grabbed a flashlight and turned it on, illuminating Grace's terrified face. "We need to get to the church," Clara said. "It's the safest place." Together they made their way through the darkened streets, the flashlight casting eerie shadows. As they approached the church, they saw Father Samuel standing at the entrance, his expression grim. "More have come," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We must prepare for the worst." Inside the church, the townspeople had gathered, their faces etched with fear and determination. Father Samuel led them in prayer, asking for strength and protection. The air was thick with tension, but there was also a sense of unity. They would face this darkness together. As the night wore on, Clara and Grace sat together, sharing stories of their lives before the darkness descended. Clara learned that Grace had been a nurse in Willow Creek, much like herself. Their bond grew stronger, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. But as dawn approached, the church doors burst open, and a horde of demons poured in, their eyes glowing with hunger. The townspeople fought bravely, but they were no match for the sheer number of creatures. Clara watched in horror as her friends fell one by one. Father Samuel wielded his crucifix, trying to fend off the demons, but he was quickly overwhelmed. The last thing Clara saw before everything went black was Grace's tear-streaked face, her eyes filled with despair. Clara awoke in a dark, damp cell, her body aching and her heart heavy with grief. She had no idea how long she had been unconscious or where she was. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of distant screams echoed through the corridors. She struggled to her feet, her mind racing. She had to find a way out, to find Grace and the others. But as she looked around, she realized with a sinking feeling that escape was impossible. The cell was secured with heavy iron bars, and there was no sign of a key. Just then, a figure appeared at the door of her cell. It was one of the demons, its eyes glowing with malevolent glee. "You're awake," it hissed. "Good. We like our prey to be aware of their fate." Clara's heart pounded with fear, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What do you want from us?" The demon laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "We want your hearts," it said simply. "Your kindness, your goodness, it sustains us." Clara felt a surge of anger and defiance. "You'll never get what you want," she spat. The demon's grin widened. "We'll see about that." Days turned into weeks as Clara and the other captives were subjected to unspeakable horrors. The demons fed on their fear and despair, savoring every moment of their suffering. Clara clung to the hope that she could find a way to save them, to end this nightmare. One night, as she lay in her cell, she heard a soft whisper. "Clara, can you hear me?" She sat up, her heart racing. "Grace, is that you?" "Yes," the voice replied. "I'm in the cell next to yours. We have to find a way out of here." Clara felt a glimmer of hope. "Do you have any ideas?" "There might be a way," Grace said. "I've been watching the demons. They seem to have a leader, a more powerful one. If we can take him down, maybe the others will lose their power." Clara nodded, even though Grace couldn't see her. "It's worth a try. But how do we get out of these cells?" "I've been working on the lock," Grace said. "I think I can get it open. Just give me a little more time." The next night, Grace managed to unlock her cell and quietly crept to Clara's. With a few deft movements, she picked the lock, and the door swung open. Clara stepped out, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. They moved through the dark corridors, careful to avoid the patrolling demons. As they neared the leader's chamber, they could hear his deep, rumbling voice. He was issuing orders to the others, his tone filled with authority and malice. Clara and Grace exchanged a determined look. This was their chance. They burst into the chamber, catching the leader off guard. Clara lunged at him with all her strength, while Grace wielded a piece of broken metal as a makeshift weapon. The battle was fierce, but the leader was strong. Just as it seemed he would overpower them, Clara felt a surge of energy. She thought of Father Samuel's words, of the power of the kind-hearted. With a final desperate effort, she drove the piece of metal into the leader's heart. The demon let out a horrifying scream, and for a moment the entire chamber seemed to tremble. Then the leader collapsed, his body disintegrating into a cloud of black smoke. As the leader perished, the other demons let out guttural howls and began to weaken. Clara and Grace took advantage of the moment, freeing the other captives and rallying them to fight back. With their spirits lifted by the leader's defeat, the group managed to drive the remaining demons into retreat. They emerged from the dungeon into the pale light of dawn, battered but alive. The air was fresher, the oppressive darkness lifting. But their victory was bittersweet. Many of their friends and loved ones were gone, victims of the demon's insatiable hunger. Greendale was in ruins, but the survivors were determined to rebuild. Clara and Grace took charge, their shared ordeal forging an unbreakable bond between them. They organized search parties to look for any remaining demons, ensuring the town's safety. As they worked, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that their fight wasn't over. The demons had been defeated for now, but their hunger was eternal. She knew they would return, and she had to be ready. One evening, as the townspeople gathered in the rebuilt church, Clara addressed them. "We have faced unimaginable darkness and emerged stronger," she said. "But we must remain vigilant. The demons are still out there, and they will come back. We must be prepared to protect our home and each other." The townspeople nodded in agreement, their faces filled with determination. They had learned the hard way that kindness and goodness could be both a strength and a weakness. But they also knew that their unity and courage would be their greatest weapons against the darkness. Months passed, and Greendale began to heal. The town was rebuilt, stronger and more fortified than before. Clara and Grace continued to lead, their experiences making them wise and resolute. They established a network with neighboring towns, sharing their knowledge and preparing for the inevitable return of the demons. One day, a stranger arrived in Greendale, his clothes worn, and his eyes filled with sorrow. He introduced himself as Marcus, a scholar who had spent years studying ancient texts about the demons. He had heard of the town's ordeal and came to offer his help. Clara and Grace welcomed him, eager to learn anything that could help them in their fight. Marcus shared what he knew. The demons were drawn to kindness and goodness because it was a source of immense power. But there was a way to harness that power for their own protection. He spoke of an ancient ritual that could create a barrier around the town using the collective goodness of its residents. The ritual required a great deal of preparation and the cooperation of everyone in the town, but it could provide a lasting defense against the demons. Clara and Grace were hesitant at first. They had seen how rituals could go wrong, how they could demand sacrifices too great to bear. But they also knew they had to do everything in their power to protect Greendale. They called a town meeting and explained Marcus's proposal. The townspeople were wary, but ultimately they agreed. They had seen the horrors the demons could bring, and they were willing to do whatever it took to keep their home safe. The preparations began immediately. Marcus guided them through the process, teaching them the ancient chants and symbols needed for the ritual. The townspeople worked tirelessly, their determination unwavering. Finally, the day of the ritual arrived. The entire town gathered in the square, each person contributing a small piece of their own goodness, a token of kindness, a memory of love, a symbol of hope. These were placed in a circle, and Marcus began the incantation. As the ritual progressed, a soft glow enveloped the town, growing brighter with each passing moment. The air hummed with energy, and the ground seemed to pulse beneath their feet. Clara and Grace stood at the center, holding hands, their hearts filled with a mix of fear and hope. With a final resonant chant, the ritual reached its climax. The glow intensified, forming a shimmering barrier around the town. The air was filled with a sense of peace and protection, as if the very essence of Greendale had come alive to shield them from harm. The townspeople looked around in awe, feeling the weight of their collective goodness surrounding them. For the first time in months, they felt a sense of true safety. Life in Greendale began to return to normal, albeit with a new understanding of the fragility of their peace. The barrier held strong, its presence a constant reminder of their unity and determination. Clara and Grace continued to lead, their bond growing stronger each day. But despite the barrier's protection, Clara knew that they could never truly let their guard down. The demons were still out there, always searching for a way to break through. She and Grace worked tirelessly to ensure the town remained vigilant, training new leaders and passing on their knowledge. One evening, as Clara walked through the town, she noticed a familiar figure standing at the edge of the barrier. It was Marcus, his expression pensive. She approached him, her heart heavy with unspoken questions. "Marcus, do you think the barrier will hold forever?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Marcus sighed, his eyes reflecting the weight of his own experiences. "Nothing is truly eternal, Clara, but as long as there is goodness and kindness in this town, the barrier will stand strong. The real challenge is ensuring that those qualities endure." Clara nodded, understanding the deeper meaning of his words. The true battle was not just against the demons, but against the erosion of their own humanity. They had to remain kind, compassionate, and united, no matter the cost. As the years passed, Greendale thrived. The barrier held, and the demons were kept at bay. The town became a beacon of hope for others, a symbol of resilience and the power of collective goodness. Clara and Grace continued to lead, their legacy shaping the future of Greendale. They knew that the darkness would always be out there, but they also knew that as long as they remained vigilant and united, they could face whatever came their way. In the end, the story of Greendale became a legend, a tale of how the kindness of the human heart could overcome even the darkest of evils. And as long as that story was told, the light of hope would never fade.